Welcome to another edition of Land of 10 Live. Sam Radin alongside former Michigan Wolverine Chris Howard. This time it's my faux pas, Chris Howard. I'm out of uniform. I'm hoping that the powers that be around here are not going to find me for this, but it's somewhat appropriate because we got a full show of Michigan Wolverines news, and I got the maize and blue on here.
Close, not quite, but I'll give you an A for I'll give you an E for effort. How about that?
Well, I would say I think they're going to put this graphic up to ruin my story, but you also have had a moment when you've been out of dress code at a job that wound up costing you a little bit more than just some ribbing from the producers. This was your second NFL team, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I was. I was in Jacksonville. I just got there on Friday, and next thing I know, I'm going to walk through practice. This is my first time in Jacksonville. Just got there, just signed my contract. I get there, I put on the uniform. We're walking through. Coughlin looks at me, looks down at my shoes. He sees my socks. He's like, you know that's a $5,000 fine, right? And I thought he was joking until I went into the locker room and saw a confidential letter on my chair, and he literally fined me $5,000 for wearing a footy. So, but that was the last time I was fined. I literally grabbed the longest pair of socks I could find for my entire tenure at Jacksonville.
I was going to say, after that, I mean, you always err on the side of wearing the long johns like you did back in the Michigan days if it's going to cost you $5,000 for the footies. So we'll see if Michigan has any fines to go along with their big news week. I don't think so. The question is, will they be fined with the news that Shea Patterson now is going to transfer to Michigan? And the question becomes, is the former Ole Miss quarterback the solution to Michigan's problems at quarterback? Now, we don't know if he's going to be immediately eligible to play next year, but here's a five-star guy that checks just about every box that Jim Harbaugh seems like he's been lacking to make that offense go.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely an upgrade to the quarterback room, especially after Michigan has lost Wilton Spade and Alex Malzone to transfers. But, a guy like Shea Patterson, he's definitely going to upgrade the quarterback room. He's going to upgrade the competition that Michigan definitely needs. And he's going to bring some depth to that. And Shea Patterson, he's a guy that can make plays. He's a playmaker. Again, like you mentioned, five-star quarterback. He is one of the pieces, but Michigan still has some pieces to kind of fill in to surround him with some talent.
A lot more on Shea Patterson coming up later on in the program. Another big week off the field for Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. Seems like another Twitter war between he and Mark D'Antonio this time, and some other words coming at the Michigan program this week, so we'll get into that. And then certainly a lot to talk about as we approach to bowl season, and we'll get into that as we go through our point counterpoint, back as it should be by popular demand. And if you want to get at us, I'm right here on this computer. You can get at us on our Facebook page, Land of 10 Live. We'll get your comments into the program as well if you want to join in with some of your opinions. So a whole lot to come up here over the course of the next 30 minutes on Land of 10 Live. Do want to delve back into Shea Patterson right now, though. We're not sure exactly when this contribution is going to take place on the field. Of course, the story, as we know, is that the sanctions are announced against Ole Miss, and NCAA has said, okay, look, rising seniors, you get a little bit of flexibility here. We're not going to make you sit out a year if you transfer to another FBS program. Shea Patterson's not a rising senior, so we don't know exactly yet whether or not the NCAA will give him a waiver to play right away for Michigan.
Yeah, well, you know what? I really think it's really about how Shea Patterson and his family interpreted what they were told from Ole Miss when he committed. I believe that what they're talking about from the Shea Patterson family on their side is they feel a little bit misled how they were told what the sanctions could be, and that resulted in him committing, believing that what they told him was true. So I think there's some leeway. The Patterson family, they feel really comfortable. They feel really confident that they will win the appeal, but we'll have to see moving forward.
Spend plenty more time on Shea Patterson and that whole deal. I want to talk about the impact that he could make on the field when he eventually gets on the field for Michigan. Before we do that, though, let's talk about the impact on the field maybe next season at Texas A&M with Jimbo Fisher coming into the fold. We know Ohio State has the record right now for the largest crowd at a spring game. Does this matter? Is this the kind of thing that, Jimbo's talking about Texas A&M's going to break that record at Texas A&M for the largest attendance at a spring game? Is that something you cared about as a player?
Not really, but in my day, I think maybe 2,000 people showed up to our spring games. But now it's all about the festivities. It's all about the glamour. It's all about engagement, fan engagement. You want to bring a lot of pride to your program, and so I think Jimbo Fisher is kind of using this as an introduction to himself, and also you want to see how engaged the fans really are and how have they really embraced him.
Fair enough that maybe it's more of a measure of kind of a referendum on the hire or how excited the fan base is. Like you said, obviously folks in College Station are pretty excited about it. I wonder if the Buckeye fans are going to kind of chirp up with, well, he's got a lobby for the record or whatever it might be. Probably that could rub some Buckeye fans the wrong way, that this guy's out there trying to go ahead and set that record when it comes to spring game. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on plenty more as it pertains to this offseason with Jimbo Fisher. We're going to talk a whole lot coming up next week on the recruiting trail. We'll talk about how that affects Texas A&M, but still in this line of the program, spending some time talking about Michigan and the Big Ten as a whole in the college basketball scene. It's Michigan State that's kind of the bell cow program right now in the Big Ten for basketball, but they're the only program, it seems like right now, that are making any ripples in the top 25. Are we concerned with this stage of the season that maybe the Big Ten doesn't have a presence in the national picture in basketball?
You know what? I wouldn't be too concerned, but I mean, listen, Tom Izzo is an outstanding coach. He's probably an even better recruiter. He's able to recruit with a lot of the top blue blood programs, so he's always getting 5-star kids, top guys to commit to his program. But when you have the kind of turnover that Iowa had, that Wisconsin had, a lot of these teams have new head coaches. So this is almost like a rebuild year for the Big Ten, but it's not something I'd be worried about just yet because it is early in the season. These teams can still make some noise later on in the season.
Yeah, I think back to that year with Wisconsin when Bo Ryan left early in the season, and then they still wind up making it to the Sweet 16 with that Bronson Koenig shot. And we see in the graphic right there with Indiana. This is the one, if you want to look at one, and we know that Archie Miller has taken over and he's got to get his footprint on this thing, but it's some pretty embarrassing losses for Indiana. They got blown out at home, if I'm not mistaken, by Indiana State. We're not used to seeing Indiana look like that on the national stage.
Yeah, it's going to take a minute for Indiana to kind of get their footing. Again, they lost a lot of guys. A lot of guys decided to go to the NBA. So it's going to take Miller a little bit to kind of get adjusted and for his players to get adjusted to him as well. So again, Indiana, you have to be patient. I know this is territory you're not used to, but it's going to take a minute for the program to kind of get back to its normal state. Michigan
takes on Texas later tonight, so we'll see if that kind of helps change things around for the Big Ten in this non-conference narrative. So you can join us anytime you want to on demand, and then obviously right here at this time, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central, every Tuesday for our Land of 10 Live. You're watching it right here on our Facebook page, and you can check us out for insight and expert analysis about all things Big Ten. Let's get some of your expert analysis on Shea Patterson. I know you got an article coming out tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. on Land of 10 Live with your full breakdown of Shea Patterson, but we'll give a little bit of the taste to the viewers about what they can expect coming up here in the next few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Shea Patterson, again, he was the #1 quarterback coming out in 2016. He was the #3 overall player coming out in 2016, regardless of position. And he actually loved Michigan coming out of high school, but for whatever reason, he was not recruited by Michigan, which is another story in itself. But Shea Patterson, he is coming off a PCL injury. He had a season-ending injury. He is coming off of that and trying to work his way back into into shape. But he is a guy that brings a true run pass threat to an offense that allows Jim Harbaugh and his brain trust to kind of use his talents to help spread out the defenses so that you can kind of take advantage of people being in the box, not being in the box. So Shea Patterson, definitely an upgrade to the position, but it's a job that's not going to be handed to him. He's going to have to work for it. He's going to have to compete with Brandon Peters, Dylan McCaffrey, and a couple other young guys Michigan is bringing in.
Well, we talked about this a second ago, too, because we don't know when the NCAA is going to clear him to play, if it's in fact this year. Also, you mentioned the notion about his ties to Michigan. The guy grew up in Toledo, about 50 miles away from the Michigan campus in Ann Arbor. And he's got Louisiana ties, too, which is good for you and good for the program. But I guess the question is, from a talent perspective, is he head and shoulders above, I guess, in what we've seen out of him at Ole Miss? Is he head and shoulders above Brandon Peters and what we presume Dylan McCaffrey would be?
I'd have to give him the edge right now. But listen, he played in a different system. Shea Patterson rarely played under center. Even in high school, he played in the spread. In college, he played in the spread. At IMG, he played in the spread. So he's going to have to try to make a transition into playing in a true pro style offense, and that's going to be an adjustment for him, not to mention learning the playbook, getting acclimated to new receivers. So he's going to have an adjustment period that's going to take some time for him. And again, he's coming off a season-ending injury, so how healthy is he? Quarterback transfers, in the past with Jake Rudock was great, but a quarterback transfer in John O'Corn was not so great. So it's kind of hit or miss. Are we getting the quarterback that was a 5-star, #1 rated quarterback coming out of the high school, or are we getting a gun-shy quarterback that has to be built back up? We just don't know that yet.
There was a pretty good transfer that came in. He was a graduate transfer, as memory serves, to Wisconsin for a year after he was at NC State. That guy's doing pretty good on Sundays nowadays, although not this Sunday in Russell Wilson. But I guess Michigan fans are hoping that's kind of where the ceiling could be on something like this. Now, obviously, a lot of Michigan folks, including a former Letterman, feel like Jim Harbaugh is not reaching the ceiling for Michigan football right now. Quite the war of words involving Jim Harbaugh this past week, not just with Mark D'Antonio on Twitter, but Amani Toomer taking a pretty big shot at Jim Harbaugh and the success or lack thereof that he's had during the course of his first 3 years. What do you make out of these type of comments out of a former Letterman?
It's tough. But if you know Amani is a guy who's never held his tongue, and he is a very opinionated guy. So, you want guys to be vocal. You want guys to be passionate about the program, and you want guys to feel like they can hold a coach accountable. Bo Schembechler himself said, "No player, no coach is above the team." And if you feel like someone is not holding up to that standard, then you vocalize that. Now, Amani works in media. He was asked a question while doing a media job, and again, he's not going to hold anything back. I know Michigan fans don't like to hear that. They want to keep these things kind of in-house, but he played for Michigan. He has a right to vocalize his opinion. Whether it's right or wrong, it's still his opinion.
Well, I think the other thing that you talk about with Amani Toomer and the quote you're alluding to with Bo Schembechler, right, was the team, the team, the team. Mm-hmm. I think the true Michigan man, according to Bo and according to that adage, maybe wouldn't come out and say something like this whatsoever, because you're detracting from the notion of the team, the team, the team.
I think it depends on how you look at it. I think it depends on how you interpret that. Again, you want to be held accountable. And remember, this day and age with social media, with media in general, this is our job. This is our job to talk about teams. Our job is to be critical of the program. And if you work in media, you can't be biased. You have to tell it like it is, and you have to be honest with people. And trust me, I've heard far worse on message boards than what Amani Toomer said in public.
Well, that's one thing. Things you say on message boards and things that we got to censor ourselves from responding to in social media is not necessarily the same as somebody who's got the credibility or at least the association with the program that Amani Toomer does. Now, I'll agree with you that maybe it was much ado out of not so much when it came to that kind of Twitter war, if you want to call it that, this week between Jim Harbaugh and Mark D'Antonio. I think D'Antonio, to whatever degree he had to, kind of stood up for himself, but I didn't even think Harbaugh's initial comments were really that incendiary when you look at it. You see it up there on the screen.
Well, listen, there's no... We all know what the relationship is between Michigan and Michigan State. And if you need any more proof of whether or not Michigan views Michigan State as a true rivalry, then look at the back and forth between Harbaugh and Coach D'Antonio. The rivalry is real. D'Antonio has kind of made a living off of beating Michigan, and that's the one thing that the state, his team, his fans take pride in. And when you feed into that, you give them all the ammunition they need to want to keep beating you year in, year out. Hopefully that role reverses and Harbaugh can use that same energy, that same fire to start beating Michigan State.
I guess all this kind of war of words with Michigan and Michigan State probably started right at the end of Lloyd Carr, because that was Mike Hart. Remember the little brother quote back in 2007? Yeah. And D'Antonio really has let his actions do the talking in the series. I know this hurts you as a Michigan guy, but obviously 2 out of 3 against Harbaugh. One of those was that crazy return punt play. But for the most part, Michigan State, I'm moving away from you as I say this, has dominated Michigan in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's true. And again, that's what D'Antonio has built his team around. That is part of their identity. Their identity is the little brother comment. They feed off of that. A lot of people talk about D'Antonio and using the disrespect card and using the chip card, but that's what you want, because that's who they are. That's their identity. As soon as they lose that, that's why you have seasons, 3-9 seasons, when you lose that edge. Now they've got that edge back, and now again they're a threat to Michigan, and they're a threat to the rest of the Big Ten.
You can always check us out on Land of 10 Live. A couple good comments coming in here on our Facebook page. Share one of these with you. Until the Buckeyes stop recruiting better talent, the team up north will never beat them. And sometimes it does come down to that, right? It's just the talent that you have on the field is what ultimately could be the outcome here. So keep your messages coming up here on the Land of 10 Live page. We'll keep some of those coming at you as we interact with you throughout the course of the program. Sticking with some of the off-field stuff, though, do want to get to more of the kind of referendum of Jim Harbaugh, though, over the first 3 years at the helm. Let's just think for a second and imagine that either it doesn't work out with Shea Patterson or he's not eligible right away. Michigan's got a tough schedule next year. They play at Michigan State, they play at Notre Dame, they play at Ohio State, and then they're home with Wisconsin. That's a pretty tough schedule for a team that still has some question marks on offense. What if Jim Harbaugh delivers another gasp 4-loss season for Michigan?
It kind of drives me crazy, because we throw around a lot, must-win seasons. Well, when you're at Michigan, it's always a must-win season. 2018 is going to be a must-win season. 2019, 20, and from here on to eternity, till there is no more football, is going to be a must-win season. So what Jim Harbaugh needs to do is focus on trying to find the players that he can use to help him beat teams like Notre Dame, like Ohio State, like Michigan State. It's not going to happen overnight. It took Dabo Swinney till his 4th year until he finally got to 10 wins. It took him 8 years just to get to the college football playoffs. It took him 9 years to win the national championship. So we have to stop looking at things in such a 3-year microcosm. It just doesn't work like that for every program.
Well, and I think the other thing that you and I have talked about before, both on and off camera, and Jimmy Jaggers talks about on our Facebook Live page, Harbaugh's brought excitement back to the program that wasn't there when it was Rich Rod and Hoke. And so you talk about building back up a brand. Okay, winning football games is the goal that's supposed to be achieved, regardless of whether or not it's Jim Harbaugh or another coach on the sideline. That's obviously going to be the benchmark. But what he has done is kind of breathe this type of excitement back into the program that we're sitting here right now in the middle of December, spending a good portion of our Land of 10 Live show talking about the Michigan Wolverines for purely off the field news.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. When Jim Harbaugh was hired, most recruits, if you talk to most recruits that we were recruiting at the time, they would tell you, I need to learn more about Michigan. And that tells you where the program was when recruits are saying, I need to learn more about Michigan. Now, they didn't need to learn anything about Jim Harbaugh because he was Jim Harbaugh. And most of the kids, the top-ranked kids, were taking visits to Michigan because Jim Harbaugh was there. So you have to look at what he brought to the program. And like you said, he brought excitement, he brought notoriety, he did his satellite camps. I mean, all those things were about branding Michigan, because you had to play catch-up to schools like Alabama, to schools like Ohio State. You needed to do something in order to capture the attention of these top recruits, and that's what Jim Harbaugh has done. Now he's got to put it all together, and he's got to win. But like I said in the past, Michigan has always been an elite quarterback and an elite offensive line away from truly being contenders. I think they found that in Shea Patterson. but the offensive line is still a work in progress.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Mason Cole, the only starter on the offensive line that leaves after this year for Michigan, so they could have 4 guys back on the offensive line.
And Patrick Kugler, we lose Patrick Kugler as starting center. Yeah.
So let's say that Michigan does return those 3 starting offensive linemen and Patterson's cleared. Let me put you on the spot. What's a realistic expectation for Michigan to win next year for it to be a success? How many games are they supposed to win?
I think for it to be a success, I still think the benchmark is around 10 wins plus a bowl game win. That's the benchmark right now. I think when Harbaugh came in, he set the expectation through the roof when he went back-to-back 10-win seasons. That first year, I think, was more of a fluke because they literally could have lost a game against Indiana. They should have lost that game against Minnesota, which would have put them around 8-4. But again, this is Michigan. The expectation is to win, and of course, he's got to do that.
You're watching Land of 10 live here on the Land of 10 Facebook page. You can join us for news, insight, and expert analysis about all things Big Ten, weekly, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central, and on demand anytime. So keep your Michigan comments coming. We'll get to those on our Land of 10 Facebook page. But how could we do a show? How could we sit together, Chris Howard, for 30 minutes without doing a little point counterpoint? We should have some fun with it tonight as we look ahead to bowl season. A couple of these I think are pretty good. Here's where we'll start off. Bowl games, and Saquon Barkley has come out and said, hey, I play for my teammates. I want to be out there and play in my team's bowl game. Should star athletes, star college football players that have a great chance to be drafted and make a boatload of money have the option to sit out so they can preserve their health?
Absolutely. But I think it also comes down to a personal preference, right? You have to weigh your financial future, your family's financial future versus a game that may not matter in the long run. And I think it comes down to whether or not that player feels he's a top 10, top 15, top 20 pick. What are the risks? He has to sit down with his coaches. He has to sit down with his family and really come together with, whether or not it's worth it, whether or not it's worth him either playing in a game or not playing in the game. And it really comes down to a personal preference and how you feel in the spirit of the game. So, I can't fault a player for making a business decision, especially when you have coaches who are making millions of dollars, making business decisions like Willie Taggart and Dan Mullins and all these other coaches who are jumping ship for, guess what? Better financial opportunities. If we're going to hold players to another standard, then we need to hold coaches to that standard as well.
I'm the first one to tell you that I agree with you wholeheartedly that there's a hypocrisy that seems allowable for coaches that's not for players. I'm with you there. But you telling me that, and I think Saquon Barkley's doing the right thing for what it's worth, that he should play, and if you play, you never intend to get hurt, and you play to the best of your ability, you shouldn't get hurt. But the fact of the matter is it could happen. It happened with Jake Butt last year at Michigan, and he probably lost a whole lot of money about it, not to mention the type of success he might have been able to have in the NFL. And I know there's insurance policies, and Maurice Hurst at Michigan has one, but to me what it comes down to is you do what Saquon Barkley's alluding to. You're playing for your teammates. There's a lot of guys that are not going to ever play another organized football game after that bowl game, and you sit out for your selfish interest about protecting yourself for the draft. Again, the team. I think Bo had it right. I don't think this is something that 20 years ago any coach or any program would tolerate. I think it's kind of maybe the prima donnas of today's college athletes.
Well, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on this because the one thing that's most important to me and is important to these other players is their families. If I have to weigh my family's interests versus my team's interests, hopefully I can sit down and have a conversation with my teammates and they will understand why I'm making the decision that I'm making. Yes, it's you're supposed to play for your teammates, but you also have to weigh what are the risks and how do those risks weigh versus how you can help your family. At the end of the day, you still have to put yourself in a position to help your family. Old war stories, football stories don't help pay your family's bills.
It's fair, although the lasting memory of being part of a team and something larger than yourself, I think is the whole reason why a lot of folks value college athletics the way that they do. I love this. I get to have the last word, and now we move on to talk about Scott Frost. We talked about this a little bit last week, and I was up in arms about it. What does Nebraska get, though? Looking at it from Nebraska's perspective, what does Nebraska get out of Scott Frost coaching UCF in the bowl game? Could this be a good thing for Nebraska?
I mean, it could. I mean, Nebraska, Scott Frost will be coaching on a big stage, and they're coaching against Auburn. If he goes out there and does the unthinkable and they beat Auburn, that just increases his profile. And again, he's doing it again on a big stage. Recruits will see that. Fans will see that. They'll get more motivated by Scott Frost coming in. And I have to believe that when Scott Frost took that job at Nebraska, he sat down with the Nebraska brass and had a conversation with them and talked about the positives and the negatives that come with him coaching in that UCF game. I have to believe that they kind of prepared for him to do that.
I'm pretty sure that so long as he was willing to sign on that line, Nebraska was willing to take whatever Scott Frost wanted to do, so long as it didn't bring dishonor to Nebraska and its football program. I guess on the bright side, you could look at this like this is a walking advertisement for Nebraska, because how can you say the name Scott Frost or show a picture of him without connoting it to Nebraska next year?
That's right.
But I still feel like it's cheap. It's cheap for the players at UCF that he comes back there to pat them on the head by coaching them, and it's cheap for Nebraska that they've got to try to, win the offseason the way that we've been talking about with Michigan and Jim Harbaugh through the success of another team. I just think that's wrong on both fronts, both the UCF front and the Nebraska front.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's tough because in one instance, I kind of feel like, I think what he did for UCF is admirable. He stuck with a team. He didn't just jump ship like a lot of coaches do. Some coaches won't even tell you they're leaving. Then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're doing a press conference and your players like texting you like, well, you could have gave me a heads up. At least I think he did the admirable thing. But again, I understand your point of view, Sam, but it's one of those situations where it is what it is.
Let's talk a little bit about bowl games for the Big Ten. We'll break some of these down for you starting next week, and we'll have a lot of bowl game coverage for you on our Land of 10 Live Facebook page. But which Big Ten team benefits the most out of a victory and a strong showing in a bowl game this season? Who can use that for momentum to catapult them to a great start next year?
I think for me, it'll have to be Wisconsin. Wisconsin playing against Miami in the Orange Bowl. If they can secure that win, that helps propel them into the next season. Again, Wisconsin, even though they were undefeated going into the championship, they still didn't get the respect that Wisconsin deserved. So I think with the win over Miami will definitely propel them into the next season, and will also secure a very high ranking, and it'll prove to people that Wisconsin is real.
To me, you got to look at Ohio State and the fact that year in and year out, this team seems like they're a top 5 caliber program on the verge of the college football playoff this year. Talked about that last week, whether or not it's warranted or not warranted that they should have been in. But a victory for Ohio State, and then, well, here we go. Urban Meyer's got the ship in the right direction coming up for next year. We learned a little bit about Haskins, the quarterback that looks like he'll be the heir apparent to JT Barrett. What kind of off-season talk will it be for the boys in Columbus? Well, you win your bowl game, all of a sudden, here's another top 5 preseason ranking for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is nothing new for Ohio State. This has been the state of their program for, the last 10, 15 years. Ohio State is a team that, no matter what, they can suffer a horrible loss against Oklahoma. They can suffer a horrible loss against Iowa, but they still find a way to put themselves in contention. They still find a way to keep themselves in the conversation for being one of the top programs in the country.
We shall find out. Some of the comments coming in our Land of 10 Live Facebook page talking about Wisconsin and their victories so far this season, talking about the milestone it would be if they could knock off Miami. I'm looking forward to that one too. I don't know if they can have the same kind of momentum in the offseason that Ohio State would have, but we'll see. It's a good litmus test for Wisconsin. I'm looking forward to digging into some of these bowl games. We got to get one of these. We got to get our crew in this too. One of these bowl mania kind of things, so we can get some bragging rights around here. Let's see if we can do that. Oh, my goodness. Our producer, Mark, in our ear, has just said Purdue is his pick to win the Big Ten in 2018.
Bold statement, Cotton.
By the way, Mark will be moving off this program pretty soon, so you can direct your Facebook Live comments to him on the next program that he comes on to. Hey, for those celebrating tonight, happy Hanukkah to you. Happy holiday season. I look forward to digging into some of these bowl games with you. That should be pretty fun.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
I'll be back next week. Looking forward to it. Be safe. Happy holidays, everybody out there.